You ever watch your own name disappear? Not just from paperwork, but from people's mouths, from memories, from history. They said I broke protocol. They said I wasn't stable. What they didn't say was the truth. This isn't a story about revenge. It's about what happens when you stop asking for permission to exist, about what they tried to bury, and what I built from the wreckage. If you've ever felt underestimated, erased, or like you had to start over just to be heard, this story is for you. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment about the moment you stopped playing by their rules. Let's talk. Because silence doesn't build legacies. Voices do. My name is Allison Blake. I'm 27. Born and raised in Virginia, on the edge of a military town where jets scream overhead and silence is earned with obedience. Around here, names carry more weight than deeds. And mine? It's always been a shadow, not a flag. Growing up, I didn't dream of war, medals, or uniforms. I dreamed of gears turning, engines breathing, wires carrying whispers. My fingers itched not for weapons but for wrenches. I could hear machines the way some people hear music, the stutter of a weak spark, the hum of something waiting to be more than it was. But none of that mattered in our house. My father, General Richard Blake, was the kind of man who filled every room without saying a word. Discipline wasn't something he taught. It was something he demanded, like gravity. You don't question it, you just fall. Then there was my brother, Nick. Blonde, sharp-jawed, mettled before he turned 23. He was the one they toasted at dinners, the one the newspapers called a legacy in the making. The golden boy. And me? I was the silence between their conversations. At the academy, I kept my head down. Not out of fear, but calculation. They never saw me coming, which was exactly how I wanted it. Let them talk about lineage and command. I built something better. I developed a prototype for an unmanned recon drone, small enough to fold, smart enough to learn terrain, fast enough to disappear. I presented it behind closed doors. I didn't need applause. I just wanted it to matter. It mattered too much. Within weeks, Nick's name appeared in connection to a classified project. Nearly identical specs, nearly identical design. My design. I remember sitting in my room that night, fingers trembling as I flipped through the leaked press briefing. His smug smile beamed from the page, right above my stolen blueprints. The title read, Operation Hawkeye, Innovation Meets Legacy. I went to my father. I should have known better. He didn't even look up from his desk. You need to learn how the world works, Allison, he said. Some things are bigger than fairness. This is about what's best for the country. For the family. For the family. 2 weeks later, I was accused of compromising project security. A baseless charge, delivered with stunning precision. I was dismissed quietly, efficiently, like I'd never been there at all. The investigation never touched Nick. The press never heard my name. And no one, not a single person, asked me what really happened. Except one. Uncle Tom wasn't blood. Not exactly. He was my mom's brother-in-law, long divorced from whatever made him part of the Blake machine. He'd once worked as a military engineer, the kind who knew how things worked and how they broke. He found me the night I cleared out my locker. Want to go somewhere loud and dirty? He asked, holding out a pair of grimy gloves. I nodded. I had nothing else left. We didn't talk about the drone. We didn't talk about the charges. We just worked. In his crumbling garage on the edge of a town no one remembered. He showed me how to listen to dying engines and read stories in the soot of an exhaust pipe. He never asked what I lost, only what I wanted to build next. Still, I couldn't stop hearing it. For the family. Even now, there are things I don't know. Why my own blood turned so quickly. Why no one stood up. Why silence became the legacy I was meant to carry. But I've learned something in that silence. Engines don't lie. They just need someone who knows how to listen. And maybe, just maybe, that's where the real power begins. The garage didn't look like much from the outside. Just a sagging tin roof and cracked concrete, paint peeling like old sunburned skin. But to me, it felt like the first honest place I'd ever been. It didn't ask me for rank. It didn't care about my last name. Just the work. We fixed what others gave up on. Engines coughing out their last breath. Transmissions that sounded like glass in a blender. Bikes no one had touched since high school. And somehow, I loved it. The blood under my fingernails. The burn on my forearm from a slipping wrench. The exact moment when a dead machine turned over and gasped back to life, like a second chance with smoke on its breath. The guys in the shop, most of them ex-military, all of them rough around the edges, didn't trust me at first. I could see it in their eyes. Too clean, too quiet, too many questions. I didn't explain. I just worked. I stayed late. I didn't flinch when my hands bled. Slowly, the looks changed. They started calling me Blake, like I belonged. But even then, I never told them the truth. Not the whole truth. Not that I had once built tech that made the Pentagon lean forward. Not that my own brother wore my invention like a badge he never earned. Not that my father helped erase me from my own life. Some truths are too heavy to lift while you're still learning how to stand. Uncle Tom let me live in the small apartment above the garage. It wasn't much. Creaky floorboards, low ceiling, fridge that hummed like a prayer. But it was mine. I could breathe there, think, be. Most nights, after the garage went quiet and the others headed home, I'd stay behind, rebuilding things that didn't need fixing. I'd take apart alternators just to understand their rhythm. I'd trace wiring like nerves in a machine too old to remember its name. Sometimes, I'd even sketch ideas I'd sworn I'd buried. I told myself I didn't miss that world. The labs, the locked rooms, the whispered competition. I told myself I'd moved on. But then, he showed up. It was a Thursday. Hot. Air so thick you could drink it. I was elbow deep in the hood of a '72 Camaro when I heard boots on the concrete. Not the usual walk. This one was too clean, too deliberate. Government leather. I didn't look up. "You're harder to find than I expected," the voice said. Male, calm, educated. The kind of voice that reads reports before breakfast and still folds its hands politely when things go sideways. I wiped my hands and turned. He was mid-40s, dressed like he didn't want to be noticed, but couldn't help it anyway. Tan slacks, blue Oxford shirt, sleeves rolled just enough to look human, eyes sharp. The kind of man who used silence the way others used threats. "Do I know you?" I asked, squinting into the sun. "Julian Sloan," he said, offering a hand I didn't take. "Department of Advanced Research, formerly DARPA. You came across my desk 2 years ago. Hawkeye Project." My spine turned to iron. "You've got the wrong Blake," I said flatly. He tilted his head. "That's the thing. I don't." I hated how calm he was, like he already knew I wouldn't walk away. Like he had time to wait for the moment I caved. "I'm not going back," I said, reaching for the wrench again. "I'm not here to recruit you," he said, stepping closer. "I'm here to tell you something." I didn't answer. "Your brother's version of Hawkeye failed last year. Couldn't handle variable terrain. Crashed during the NATO demo. Set back the program by 18 months. His team blamed the AI core." I read deeper. He paused, watching me. "Yours worked," he said softly. "Yours learned. They just never let it breathe." I looked at him, my fingers tightening around the wrench. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing," he said, too easily. "Just options." He pulled a card from his pocket and set it on the car's dusty hood. You left the world too soon, Blake. Not because you were wrong, but because someone else was afraid you might be right. With that, he left. No pitch, no threat. Just those words hanging in the heat. I didn't pick up the card. Not right away. But that night, long after the garage had gone dark, I stood at the window, holding it between two fingers like it might burn. On it was a name I hadn't heard in 2 years. Project Arachne. A different name, a different direction. But I knew exactly what it was. And I knew what they were trying to build. The only question was, why me? And why now? I didn't call Julian Sloan. Not that night. Not the next day. Not even after I looked up Project Arachne and found the digital echo of my own fingerprints buried in government patent trails under names I didn't recognize. But I didn't throw away the card either. I kept it wedged behind a rusted bolt on my workbench, staring at it sometimes like it might blink back. I told myself I wasn't interested. But the truth was, it wasn't curiosity that held me back. It was fear. Because I knew that going back into that world meant facing everything I'd tried to bury. My brother, my father, the lie they used to erase me, and maybe worst of all, the question that had never stopped gnawing at me. Why was I the one they had to ruin? It was Tom who broke the silence. "You've been quiet," he said, sipping black coffee from a chipped mug that read, "I void warranties." I shrugged. "Just tired." "Liar." He smiled faintly. "You've got the same face your mom used to wear before quitting a job she'd already packed for. You're sitting on a decision." He never pried. That was his gift. Just a nudge. Never a push. So when I finally told him about Sloan, about Arachne, about the card that was burning a hole in my conscience, he didn't blink. "You gonna pretend you're not curious?" he asked. "I'm not curious," I said. "I'm angry." He raised an eyebrow. "Then use it." 3 days later, I called Sloan. His voice was the same, calm, careful, calculated, like he'd known I'd come around eventually. "I want to see it," I said. "Arachne." There was a pause. "Pack a bag. I'll have a driver at your garage at dawn." The facility was 2 states over, hidden beneath a tech startup front in Denver. Clean walls, coated doors, no insignias. Nothing screamed military. That's how you knew it was serious. I was led down a hallway that smelled of ozone and policy, past security checkpoints that knew more about me than I did. Inside the lab, I met the team. Civilians mostly. Young, sharp, quiet. They glanced at me like I was both myth and warning. One woman handed me a tablet without making eye contact. The screen lit up with schematics that made my stomach twist. They were mine. Not copies. Not imitations. My original design, built from the private drafts I had never submitted. Data I'd encrypted and deleted long before I was dismissed. Somehow, someone had kept them alive. "Who gave you this?" I asked Sloan. "Let's call it a leak from the wrong hard drive at the right time," he replied. "We knew you wouldn't trust us without proof." He leaned forward. "Arachne is built on your learning algorithm. But there's a problem. It's too intuitive. It starts anticipating human error before we know it exists. It's not just reactive anymore. It's predictive. The department is nervous." I looked at him, trying to process what I was hearing. "You built something smarter than you could control, and now you want me to fix it?" He hesitated. "No. We want you to teach it. We need someone who understands not just the tech, but the ethics of it. Someone who doesn't see code as a weapon." Something in my chest tightened. "Why me? Why not someone else?" "Because it already knows you." That night, they gave me access to a private terminal. Full clearance. I combed through the logs, the neural data, the tests. What I found chilled me. Lines of code that sounded like questions, loops that adjusted to emotional inflection, patterns in the AI's behavior that mirrored my own design quirks, things I'd done without thinking, back when this was a dream I still believed in. It had learned from me, even in silence. That's when the messages started. First, an unsigned envelope slid under my apartment door. Then, an anonymous email with an attachment that triggered every classified warning in the book. Inside, a redacted report about my dismissal from the academy. Pages missing, dates altered, and one name in the corner that wasn't there before. Nick Blake, authorized reviewer. I didn't sleep that night. In the morning, I called Tom. The call went to voicemail. I tried again. Nothing. I left the lab early, sick to my stomach, and took the first flight back to Houston. When I pulled up to the garage, the front gates were hanging open, the lights off. Tom's truck was gone. So was his toolbox. Inside, the office had been turned over. Drawers pulled, papers scattered, files missing. No signs of a break-in, just a message. On the wall, someone had scrawled in thick black marker, "You should have stayed gone." The garage smelled like oil and silence. That was the worst part. Not the overturned furniture, not the files that had vanished, not even the warning scrawled in ink thick enough to bleed through the wall. It was the silence. Tom was gone. No trace, no call, no note. I stood in the middle of the wreckage, trying to breathe past the panic clawing up my throat. Someone new. Someone high enough to reach into my life and rip out the one person who still made me feel like I mattered beyond what I could build. I checked my phone. Still no answer. By the time I returned to the lab, Sloan was waiting, already reading me like a dossier with too many redacted lines. "Was it a warning?" he asked. "It was a message," I said. "They're scared." He didn't ask who they were. He didn't have to. There weren't many men with the kind of reach that could erase someone like Tom, and fewer still who'd care enough to use it. Nick. My father. Maybe both. That night, I did something I swore I'd never do again. I pulled up the encrypted backups I'd hidden from even myself. Every fragment of the Hawkeye project I had left, buried in dead servers and air-gapped drives. And I started building again. Not because they asked me to, because they needed to be answered. If Project Arachne was going to become a tool of power, it would be on my terms, not theirs. I rewrote the architecture from the inside out, changed the way it learned, the way it adapted. I gave it boundaries, not walls, but questions, ethical logic gates, places where it had to ask before it could act. In a way, I gave it a conscience. It recognized me instantly, responded faster, smarter, gentler. It wasn't just a machine anymore, it was becoming a mirror. When I brought my version online in the lab, Sloan just watched, quiet, almost reverent. "What do we call it now?" he asked. I didn't answer, because I wasn't done. I had one more job, the truth. I flew to DC under a fake name, wore clothes that didn't belong to me, walked into the building where I had once been erased and asked to see someone I'd spent years trying to forget. My father looked older, not weaker, just more tired. Like time had finally worn down the armor he'd wrapped himself in all his life. He didn't stand when I entered, didn't speak right away. "You look like your mother," he said eventually. I didn't blink. "She'd be ashamed of what you did to me." His jaw clenched, that old military steel still clinging to every syllable. "You think you were the only one who paid a price? You buried me," I said. "For the family." He stared at me. "I protected your brother," he said. "Because if I hadn't, the whole damn chain would have collapsed. Do you understand that? There are things bigger than fairness. And smaller than integrity," I replied. There was silence. "Where's Tom?" I asked. He didn't answer. I leaned closer. If you know and you don't tell me, then what happens next is on you. I left without waiting for a response. 3 days later, I received a package in the mail. No return address. Inside, a burner phone, a set of GPS coordinates, and one line of text. He's safe. For now. Keep it that way. The message wasn't signed, but I knew who sent it. Nick's silence had always been the loudest part of him. I gave Sloane the updated version of Arachne and walked away. No press release, no medal, no televised hearing. I didn't want vindication. I wanted freedom. It came slowly, not like a door swinging open, but like light returning to a room you forgot had windows. I used the payout from my consultation to buy back the garage. Rebuilt it from the ground up, every brick laid by hand-picked veterans, women who had been pushed aside, overlooked, broken, and left behind. We called it the Forge. We didn't just fix machines. We trained builders, thinkers, engineers with dirt under their nails and fire in their eyes, women who knew how to be invisible and were ready to be seen. Sometimes people asked me why I didn't go back to the lab, to DARPA, to the spotlight. I always gave the same answer. Because that's not where my voice is. It's here. In the sound of a socket wrench clinking against steel. In the hum of an engine that shouldn't work, but does. In the quiet, steady breath of someone learning they are more than their scars. They tried to silence me once. Now, every bolt I tighten, every circuit I teach, every woman I hand a torch to, is a symphony. And I am no longer the echo in someone else's legacy. I am the start of my own.